I'm sorry that I've been unable to be in Eswatini at PiggsPeak Hotel today with you, either in person or virtually. But I did want to just pass on a few messages through this short presentation. I think it was about 2 decades ago that I first came to Swaziland. I was being employed by the European Union to look at tourism prospects. And they were particularly interested in the idea of corridors across Swaziland and looking at how the economic value of those corridors, those transit routes, could be increased. And I was very aware from the beginning of my involvement with Swaziland that you suffer very much from the risk of being simply a detour, a tick box on somebody's list of countries they visited, but where very little value is received by Swaziland as the destination. There's another example here, do Eswatini in a day. Interesting example of the kind of photographs that they use to emphasize the exotic and make it attractive. And clearly, just looking at the physical location of Swaziland, you are an attractive transit route from Mozambique into South Africa and vice versa, or indeed, as I did it the first time I went to Swaziland, from one part of South Africa to another, getting the extra stamp in my passport, something I'm certainly not proud of today. And that really raises what is, for many politicians, the fundamental question about tourism, whether you're a national or a local politician. The critical question is, are you going to use tourism to benefit your community and your people, or is the place going to be used by tourism? And I would argue that too often in the past, Swaziland has been used by tourism rather than use tourism for its economic development. I wanted to argue that one of the critical things for Swaziland to do, Eswatini, now is to reduce the rate at which people pass through the country. Village Ways is one example of a company from India which is doing this extremely well in the foothills of the Himalayas, where people are essentially walking through the landscape from village to village, staying in villages, talking with people from the community, and the benefits are going to the communities. One of the reasons that Village Ways was first established was to reduce out-migration by young people. And the offer is extremely attractive. Journey through India's villages to glimpse the side of the country few ever see and make meaningful connections. That program has now grown, and it's possible to visit many parts of India now with Village Ways and to experience it in a completely different way to the traditional tourist route. This is an example from Kerala, a place I would now argue is the world's leading destination for responsible tourism. It's in the southern part of India, Kerala state. They adopted responsible tourism in 2008, and it's grown very rapidly. But what they're offering is the opportunity to meet with village craftspeople, to spend some time with them, and to know that those people are being compensated for their time, that the time they're spending with you. So you don't have to leave a tip or purchase anything. It's all part of a very professional experience where you get your hands on. The lady in the bottom right there is showing how they make coir rope, and one of the proudest souvenirs I have personally is of a length of coir rope which I made using that kind of equipment in a village in Kerala. An absolutely memorable trip, and one that I talked about with many people, encouraging them to go and have the experience for themselves. Very helpful if you've got those kinds of memories in terms of viral marketing and personal recommendations. I've talked here in Eswatini before about Porter's cluster theory. Essentially, any tourism destination is a cluster of services and goods which are used to service the tourist, whether that's food or accommodation or craft or experiences. His theory of cluster theory has been extremely influential over the years, but it was post the major 2008 recession that Porter began to talk about creating shared value and contrasting the traditional approach of top-down tourism with a primary focus on foreign exchange earnings and volumes of visitors, and turning that round and saying, let's look at this from the other side. What does it look like from a bottom-up approach? How do we build communities? How do we build economic success at the local level? How do we maximise local economic benefit? And part of that is by maximising supplementary and alternative livelihoods, just as they have done in Kerala with the village life experiences, which are making a major contribution to household incomes. And similarly through integrated rural development, where people walking through the countryside are adding to the vibrancy of the countryside by what they spend, but also creating great memories co-created between them and their hosts, encouraging people to return or to recommend others to have a similar experience. So Porter and Kramer arguing from Harvard that we need to start reconceiving the way we think about our products and our markets, and to recognize that we need to meet social needs whilst better serving our existing markets, accessing new ones, or lowering costs through innovation. And often local sourcing can reduce costs. It certainly reduces the costs of transport and the impacts of transport on climate change through emissions. We need to redefine this, productivity, focus on improving quality, quantity, cost, and the reliability of local supply, and the role you can play in stewarding essential natural resources if you purchase and source as much of your consumables as possible from the local community. By enabling local cluster development, businesses can compete and thrive. Businesses, after all, need reliable local suppliers, functioning infrastructure, roads, and above all, perhaps, talent. And that comes from a thriving destination. So the challenge is to create competitive advantage from building a social value proposition and to turn that into a business strategy. So how might we look at this in terms of tourism in Eswatini? Well, one of the things that accommodation providers always want is extended length of stay. You don't have to change the bed linen so much. You have a higher level of occupancy, and people will spend more in the hotel if they spend for 2 nights. I'm talking about their opportunity to spend on incidentals like getting their shoes cleaned or money in the bar, whatever. But extended length of stay brings additional revenue. And if there's much more to do in the area, then tour operators and travellers will book themselves in to stay longer at the hotel. And of course, if you're offering access to some really good experiences, both in the hotel and in the area around, then you get repeats and referrals. From the community's point of view, they get an enhanced sense of place about the importance of their own place, and that certainly, I think, happened at PiggsPeak over the last year or so. But there's also the local economic benefit that comes from employment, from supplementary and alternative livelihoods where people are spending perhaps some time visiting a local farm or a local herder, and integrated rural development through craft and other activities. Really, it can benefit both the accommodation provider, in this case PiggsPeak, but also the local community, whether that's in the town or in the surrounding countryside. There's a lot of talk in the literature about the multiplier effect, and I thought I should just mention it here. One of the things about tourism money is that if it's spent in the local community or in ways that benefit the local community, it will be respent in that local community. So the people who are employed at the PiggsPeak Hotel spend most of their wages in the PiggsPeak area, and that goes back into the local economy, and it circulates in a kind of multiplier effect of increased expenditure driving further rounds of expenditure in the local community. But different forms of tourism have very different multiplier effects because of these rounds of expenditure. So it's very positive. If you purchase local craft or stay in a local hotel or pay tax locally, all of those monies will recirculate, either through government spending that taxation money on repairing the roads, or the hotel buying local goods and services, employing local people, or purchasing local craft. That's a very positive way in which tourism contributes with a multiplier to the local economy. It's quite different, can actually have a negative impact if the money spent in the local economy goes straight out of it. And many Airbnbs, unfortunately, do precisely that. Not all, there are lots of exceptions, but many, the tourism spend goes straight out to a bank account where the person who owns the property keeps their money, and then is often spent outside even of the country, let alone the place where the tourism has taken place. That leakage is a serious problem in tourism and undermines the multiplier effect of tourism. I know you're going to have a presentation shortly about the Barberton route. I do think this is a really important opportunity for PiggsPeak to attract a different kind of tourist who's coming to look at this exciting and very interesting geological landscape, where so much of the ancient landscape is revealed in the geology. And I hope very much that that road will open soon, because I think it'll bring a lot of prosperity to PiggsPeak as a town, but also bring in a lot more tourists from South Africa through that route. This is an example, if you like, of the way in which tourism can benefit the local community by encouraging the sense of pride in the history of the place. And I know that the PiggsPeak Hotel has worked with the community to establish at least one festival, and there will be more to come. And similarly with the visits from the choirs. So to cut to the real essence of this, you can see from the PiggsPeak Hotel figures that in the financial year 2024 to 25, the hotel spent $43,465 in the local economy. It's the local economy of PiggsPeak. It's increased its staffing to 100, which means it spent $441,000 contributed to local households in 24-25. The PiggsPeak Hotel has also contributed $485,207 to the local economy. That's the total. So if you add the local economy spend plus the staffing spend, that gives you a figure of close to $500,000 spent in the local economy in one financial year. And of course, when PiggsPeak is full, it often has to buy in accommodation from other establishments, and there's your $8,479 spent with accommodation businesses. And then finally, there's 5.25 million Eswatini Emalangini being contributed in tax and levies to the government. So you can see the scale of the contribution that the PiggsPeak Hotel is now making, both to the national economy and to the local PiggsPeak economy. So how do you increase local benefit? Well, one of the best ways is by sourcing new products which have been made locally. Tourists obviously will want to purchase souvenirs to take away, and that is constrained if people are flying. One of the things the hotel could do is to offer to oversee and ensure that parcels brought to the hotel, packed up there, dispatched abroad, will actually arrive, giving people confidence to buy some of the bigger craft products which they might not otherwise be willing to buy, knowing that they won't be able to get them on the plane. I think there's a big opportunity there for the hotel to show its solidarity and support for the local crafters. For the hotel, they can buy craft and other souvenir products to sell through the shop from the local community. There are opportunities to get the uniforms made locally, and the soft furnishings for the hotel. One of the impressive things about PiggsPeak is the extent to which it is furnished with soft furnishings from the local area. Then, of course, there are the consumables like meat, fruit, vegetables, and nuts, sometimes meat, and also an opportunity in the restaurant perhaps to showcase local dishes to encourage people to take some Eswatini cooking traditions home with them. Then in terms of employment, you've got the volume of people who are employed, the quality that comes from having a well-committed group of people serving in the hotel, looking after the guests as hosts, and of course also interns, creating opportunities for younger people. The other thing which isn't talked about enough is that when the crafter is able to meet directly with the potential purchaser to talk about the product, the price, the design and the utility, makes a big difference to their sales. And we know from work in the Gambia that we were able to increase the incomes of crafters significantly by enabling them to have access to the guests in the hotel away from the hassle of the market, where they could just sit and talk about what would make the product more attractive for the tourist. So as well as making some sales, they also got the big advantage of market intelligence about what would sell and the potential uses to which these craft products could be put when people got them home. You may or may not be aware that the system for audited accounts that I've developed with Gwyn O'Leary and implemented through two of the TFPD products, both at Klaus Lodge and Witzisuk. We've also done the same thing here at PiggsPeak Hotel, and that's where those figures come from. What we're able to demonstrate now is that audited accounts can reliably support the social and environmental claims being made by accommodation, and that enables us to discourage greenwashing, which is an increasing problem in the industry. We need people to be proud of the changes they've made and the ways they've improved tourism, the way they've made tourism better. We need them to talk about it, not be frightened from talking about it because of the risk of being criticised for mis-selling, or worse, being penalised for mis-selling products. Here are the three examples then: the PiggsPeak economic benefit case study, Witzisuk, another one, and then Klaus Lodge. So we've had three examples of this now, and the technology, the approach is being rolled out as we speak by EasyJet Holidays, who are talking with some of the hotels that they use about rolling out this methodology. I think you should take some pride in the fact that this has been developed with the help of the PiggsPeak Hotel, and that it's beginning to have international influence. So the economic benefits that you can measure through the audited accounts include the wages, the local sourcing, and the taxation. And then in terms of the environment, most hotels, most places in the world, buy their water on an invoice from the water company. It's easy to work out the amount of water used per bed night. Any accountant can do that for you. And the same with the emissions involved with electricity supply and fuel for vehicles and generators. Again, easy for the accountants to work out how much fuel is being used and expended per bed night, and also therefore how much waste emissions are going into the atmosphere and causing global warming. And then finally, the balance sheet. Although waste won't appear on the balance sheet unless you can find ways of upcycling it or selling it on, everything else now can be certified as verified by your accountant, and that's a big step forward for people who find the cost of certification prohibitive. So just to wrap up, let me come back to Village Ways. I think it would be worth next year, there is a follow-on conference, looking at the Village Ways model, seeing whether that could be made to work in Swaziland. I think there's a lot in common in both the people and the nature of the landscape and the diversity of ways in which people make a living within the landscape. It's a big part of the attraction. And similarly, the village life experience from Kerala, where people are getting additional income from tourism whilst maintaining their own craft work. Thanks for listening. Really sorry I'm not there today. Sorry that's been a bit of a gallop through the presentation I would like to have made, but I hope to be there with you next year. I wish you every success with the remainder of the conference.